Hi guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here, for all of your support. It's so greatly appreciated. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't yet. It really helps me out, especially because I'm still such a small channel and because YouTube's not really a fan of the true crime community. So that really helps me to get my videos pushed out into the algorithm. With that, I hope everybody's having a great day and that you're all happy and healthy, and let's get started. Hi guys, so before we start, I just want to say that I am not a medical professional, but I am close to quite a few of them, and I have a tremendous respect for what you guys do. I'm just bringing you guys the facts that I've found. If you are a medical professional or have any insight, please feel free to clarify anything in the comments. I love to be educated and I love to read your comments, especially when you guys share knowledge or experiences with me. Okay, so let's start. Radonda Vaught was born on January 25th, 1984, and was from Nashville, Tennessee. She attended Western Kentucky University and earned her Bachelor of Science in Nursing degree, along with 2 registered nursing certificates. She also completed 2 years of certificate courses for a certificate in leadership studies. In 2006, while earning her bachelor's degree, she started working as a licensed realtor for Keller Williams Realty Corp. She would only keep this job for 9 months, though. In February of 2015, Radonda joined Sumner Regional Medical Center as a registered nurse. Charlene Murphy was born on July 21st, 1942, and resided in Gallatin, Tennessee. She married the love of her life, Sam Murphy, on July 23rd, 1960. The couple was happily married for 57 years. They have 2 sons together, Gary and Michael. She also has 7 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. Charlene loved her family, especially her grandchildren. She loved going to yard sales, being active in her church, and attending church functions. She was a born-again Christian with a friendly smile and generous spirit. She worked at Walmart for 24 years until retiring in 2017 because of failing health issues. December 26, 2017. Charlene was admitted to Vanderbilt for a subdermal hematoma, or bleeding of the brain, that was causing headaches and loss of vision. According to reports, despite this, Charlene was awake and her condition was improving. Charlene was taken to the radiology department to receive a full body scan, which involves laying in a large tube-like machine. Because she suffers from claustrophobia, doctors prescribed her Versed, which is a standard anti-anxiety medication. The PET scan nurse, called the primary nurse, who got an order for 1 milligram of Versed for Charlene. Radonda, who was the help-all nurse, was asked by the patient's primary nurse to go to radiology and administer the medication. The order was entered at 2:47 p.m., and the pharmacy verified it at 2:49 p.m. At 2:59 p.m., Radonda went to remove the medication from the medicine dispensing cabinet. She typed VE under the patient's profile and it didn't come up. That's when Radonda clicked the override function to obtain access to all medications in the cabinet. Although this was common practice in this hospital, investigators stated that she should have called the pharmacy to ask why the order did not populate, as this was not an emergency. She instead searched VE again, and many medications popped up. She selected the first one. She thought it was Versed, but what she selected was Vecuronium. This is a paralytic, often used during emergencies and only when a patient has a breathing tube. At least 3 screens on the medication dispensing cabinet said, "Warning, paralyzing agent." One of the screens had a yellow alert banner. She had to provide a reason for using the override function and indicate how many vials she was removing. Versed, the sedative she intended to remove, comes in liquid form. Vecuronium comes in a powder, as it is not stable for very long in liquid form. To give Vecuronium, the nurse has to reconstruct it before injecting it into an IV. Radonda told investigators that it did strike her as odd that she had to reconstruct Versed, since she hadn't had to do it in the past. After pulling the medicine, she immediately looked back at the vial to see the instructions on how to give it. She gathered supplies to administer it and then headed to radiology. Once she got there, she found Charlene, checked her armband, and gave Charlene the IV. She then immediately left to go back up to the neuro ICU. Charlene was not on any monitoring and was not being observed in any capacity for at least 30 minutes. After receiving the medication, she would not be able to move, notify anyone, or breathe on her own. According to the investigation report, before someone realized the patient was not breathing, Murphy had lost consciousness, suffered cardiac arrest, and was ultimately left partially brain dead. Murphy's son, Gary, told the Tennessean that family began pressuring Vanderbilt staff to tell them what was going on. Eventually, a doctor told them that it appeared Murphy had been given too much or possibly the wrong medication. She was so cheery and talking to us, and the next thing you know, we never got to speak to her again, says her son, Gary. Hours later, at about 1 a.m., Charlene's family gathered at the hospital to say goodbye to her. Doctors said she suffered severe brain damage and would never recover from it. They recommended taking her off the breathing machine, which was the only thing that was keeping her alive. Her husband, Sam, said, choking back tears, that they told him that she was never going to get better. So I had to do what I had to do. I couldn't keep her like that. The next day, a Vanderbilt official would confirm to Charlene's family that she was given the wrong medication, which caused her to stop breathing during the scan. Charlene's son, Gary, said the one thing that Vanderbilt did not tell them was what drugs Charlene had received by mistake. The family would find out about a year later when they saw the story on the news that the drug was Vacronium, a powerful paralyzer that is used to hold patients still during surgery. It is also used, this is awful, it's also used to execute inmates on death row. Her son would say, that's the one thing that upsets me. When I see it was a drug they use for lethal injection, I don't know, man, that's just not right. I understand everybody makes mistakes, and I feel for the lady who is involved in this because I have a heart that takes after my mom, but it still bothers us, end quote. Radonda did immediately admit to what had happened, and she never denied accountability for it, which I have to give her that much credit. Later in the afternoon, on December 27th, 2 neurologists reported her death to the Davidson County Medical Examiner without mentioning the medical error, deeming the death natural due to a brain bleed. And it appears that the medical examiner did not investigate the death either.
Charlene Murphy worked at the Gallatin Walmart for more than 20 years.
Wouldn't mind having her here to hug her one more time.
It's where Joanne Riker met the woman who would become like a mentor.
When I really got to know Charlene is when I lost my son. And, she was one of the shoulders that I could, lean on.
She went to her funeral more than a year ago, side by side with family and friends.
My heart breaks for the family, because it shouldn't have happened. She should still be here with us, Had they given her the right medicine, she'd be here still today.
Instead of getting the anxiety drug Versed, investigators say nurse Radonda Vaught overrode the system and mistakenly gave her Vacronium, which is a paralytic that killed her. Records show Vaught became licensed in 2015 and had no history of medical discipline on her record. Now she faces reckless homicide and patient abuse charges. But still,
I think she would have come to the point of forgiving, just because that's, her personality.
Now loved ones try to mirror her compassion as they cope with the loss.
Talking, eating, reading, laughing when she left, and she never made it back.
Pain and heartbreak are a reality this Gallatin family is living every day.
A Vanderbilt nurse giving the wrong medication, killing their loved one.
News 4's Cameron Taylor is live from the hospital tonight. And Cameron, this has actually destroyed 2 families.
Yeah, Tom, the family of the nurse who is now facing charges and the family who is grieving over their loved one, they fear they haven't been told everything.
His mom was funny with them yard sales. I always go and try to make a deal. It was a quarter. She was actually buried with some quarters.
Charlene Murphy had a knack for getting a good deal. She touched the hearts of everyone she met and treated them like family.
And if pressing charges would bring her back, absolutely, we would do it. But pressing charges won't bring her back.
For more than a year, the Murphy family has been trying to understand what happened. The 75-year-old had been dealing with headaches and trouble seeing. When doctors recommended a PET scan, she needed medication to help with claustrophobia. But a nurse gave her the wrong one, killing her.
I don't want to see another family have to go through what we've had to go through. It was unexpected.
The nurse charged in the case, Radonda Vaught, is off the job. Murphy's family believes it was an accident.
Mom was a forgiving type person. Mom would have forgiven her for it.
The hospital is another story.
If they'd been honest from the beginning, it would be easier to accept, but there's been so many lies, so many different stories.
Vanderbilt saying a manager spoke with the family confirming, quote, there had been a medication error, expressed our great remorse and apologies, and offered to meet in person with the family. The hospital also says they met with the family's attorney and talked about what happened in detail. The Murphys worry they'll never know all the answers.
We just want closure. We want closure. We're hoping that the nurse's family has peace.
Now, the two medications involved, Versed and Vecuronium, both start with the letters VE. One helps with anxiety, the other can paralyze you. So quite a difference right there.
Quite a difference indeed. Cameron, a lot of folks have been posting on our Facebook page about this story.
And it's really become a heated debate on there. But, you know, Cameron, many people are saying they feel sorry for the nurse here.
Yeah, they do. And once again, the family says their mother would have forgiven this nurse in this case, and that they're now pushing for more safety precautions at the hospital, maybe having some more eyes on what medications go to people at this hospital so this never happens to someone else.
January 3rd, 2018, Radonda is fired from the hospital. Vanderbilt does not report the fatal medical error to the state or federal officials, which is legally required. Then sometime in early 2018, Vanderbilt negotiates an out-of-court settlement with Charlene's family, requiring them not to discuss it publicly. And this is actually done a lot with malpractice situations to prevent negative publicity and lengthy, expensive trials. Around May of 2018, Radonda begins to work as a throughput coordinator at a different hospital system in Nashville, and she still has her nursing license at this time. A throughput coordinator serves as the hospital's lead for managing daily patient throughput. So their primary goals of this position are to improve the hospital throughput, increase inpatient bed utilization, and reduce patient or bed turnaround days. In October of 2018, a tipster alerted federal and state officials to the unreported error. The Tennessee Department of Health, who is responsible for investigating medical professionals, decide not to pursue disciplinary action. In a letter to Vanderbilt, the agency's investigators say that Radonda's case did not constitute a violation of the statutes and or rules governing the profession, with Radonda even receiving a letter stating that this matter did not merit further action. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, in response to this anonymous tip, conducted a surprise investigation. CMS stated that Vanderbilt must prove that they're taking actions to prevent similar errors from happening again. Vanderbilt responds with a plan. Changed policy so that critically ill patients must be monitored during transport. Changed policy so if getting medications that cause respiratory depression, they have to be monitored. Changed high alert medication policy to reflect monitoring necessary when high alert medicines are given. Changed medical administration policy to require more documentation monitoring. They discussed their moderate sedation policy. Versed is considered moderate sedation. Apparently, their policy already required that anyone getting moderate sedation needed to be monitored and observed. They also had other updates like chart reviews, work groups that were created. Paralyzing agents must override medication lists. They're no longer able to pull paralyzing agents by drug names, and they must use paralyzing agent, adding a pop-up warning requiring a 2-nurse sign-off to give paralyzing agents during start, change of container, and handoff. They also updated their reporting requirements to the state and medical examiner. In February of 2019, the case becomes public when Radonda is arrested on criminal indictment for her alleged role in the death. She's charged with reckless homicide and impaired adult abuse. In late February of 2019, she pleads not guilty. Prosecutors make details of the case public, stating she made 10 separate errors before injecting the drug. She failed to contact the pharmacy before overriding the non-emergent drug. Pop-up on Acudose when pulling the medication requires you to select a reason for the override, and pop-up also clearly states paralyzing agents. These were both disregarded. After this, the screen returns to select medication name and paralyzing agent on the screen. This was disregarded. User is then asked to select quantity on top of the screen. says paralyzing agent and yellow caution sign that says alert. This was disregarded. She didn't notice that it was powder versus liquid. She had to read the instructions on the vial but ignored where it said the name of the medication. She had to reconstruct the medication to turn it from powdered form to a liquid form, which is not normal for Versed. She had to look directly at the red cap that says paralyzing agent when drawing it up. She knew the PET scan staff could not administer the medication or monitor her after. She injected Charlene and immediately left her alone in the waiting room on the stretcher. This violated her mandated observation protocol. Radonda is arrested and indicted. The Tennessee Department of Health decides to reverse its prior decision to not discipline her, but does not provide details on why they completely changed their stance when the facts of the situation itself has not changed, which is very interesting. The Tennessee Department of Health charges Radonda with unprofessional conduct, abandoning or neglecting a patient that required care, and failing to maintain an accurate patient record. Radonda had to face 2 legal proceedings, a criminal trial and a professional hearing. In the spring of 2020, the pandemic hits and there were trial delays. In July of 2021, her discipline hearing begins. She admits fault, but her attorneys also described the flawed Vanderbilt procedures. On January 23, 2021, her nursing license is revoked. The board appears sympathetic but does not overlook the errors. March 21, 2022, her criminal trial begins. March 25, 2022, after only a few hours of deliberation, the jury finds Radonda guilty of criminally negligent homicide and abuse of an impaired adult. And she's going to be sentenced on May 13th, 2022, and she faces up to 8 years in prison total with both charges, and her sentences will likely run concurrently. She was acquitted of reckless homicide, though. Negligent homicide, which is what she's charged with, is a death caused by criminally negligent behavior, which means 2 criteria must be met. Someone must have died as a result and died due to this negligence. So this would be like leaving a baby in a hot car or waiting too long to call 911. She was acquitted of reckless homicide, which is more serious. So with reckless homicide, the person's aware of the risk they're creating by their conduct and choose to disregard it. So this is like driving while intoxicated, causing a fatal car accident, or dropping an object from the top of a tall building. The Nashville DA has been quoted in various news outlets stating that Radonda's disregard for all safety measures and basic nursing safety checks constituted reckless behavior.
Hospital when Radonda Vaught is accused of making a deadly error, pulling the wrong medication for 75-year-old Charlene Murphy in December 2017. Vaught listened intently to testimony, at times appearing emotional. One of the witnesses, Darren Crooks, who was shadowing Vaught the day she gave Murphy a paralyzing agent instead of an anxiety med. Crooks testified he chose to work under Vaught in particular because of her passion for nursing. Murphy's daughter-in-law, through tears, sharing the moment at the hospital, she began to believe her mother's life could be in danger.
When I heard code blue, it was PET scan, ICU 15 or something along that line, and my heart fell to my toes.
Many nurses nationwide have shown support for Vaught, saying she shouldn't be jailed for what they call an honest mistake. Prosecutors told the jury Vaught recklessly ignored red flags and warnings in administering that drug. They'll continue to try and prove their case over the coming days.
A big weight lifted off my shoulders. But when I say weight, I mean the weight of this legal process, not the weight of Ms. Murphy's life being lost. I want to make that really clear because that's something that will always be with me.
Well, we have seen her in the courtroom all week, but for the first time, we're hearing from Radonda Vaught, the nurse on trial who was convicted today for a patient's death.
Vaught spoke to us this morning before learning of her conviction on lesser charges. She had been charged with reckless homicide. The jury found her guilty of criminally negligent homicide and gross neglect of an impaired adult. News Channel 5's Chris Davis has been at the courthouse all week for us.
Yeah, Chris, how did Radonda Vaught actually react when that verdict was read?
Well, Rory, that was really what was striking about it all. If you followed the trial, you know on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday during testimony, Radonda was incredibly emotional at times, visibly weeping and putting her head on the table. That wasn't the case today when the verdict was read. And afterwards, she told reporters two things. One, she will always be just emotional and moved by the mistake that she made in the Charlene Murphy case. But two, she's relieved that this legal process at least, is finally over.
Nothing that the district attorney said yesterday is worse than anything that I've said to myself. So, number one. Number two, it's been 3.5 years waiting for this process to be done within the legal system. And so I am very happy that that part is just over with.
Vaught was found guilty of gross neglect of an impaired adult and criminally negligent homicide, which was the lesser charge of the state's original reckless homicide charge. Vaught mixed up medication when treating patient Charlene Murphy, who was hospitalized at Vanderbilt for a brain bleed. Instead of giving her a sedative, Vaught administered a paralytic that suppressed her breathing and movements. The district attorney's office praised the jury's decision and had a message for nurses who felt under attack during this trial.
We want Davidson County to know that we, as the DA's office, do not prosecute on lies. We prosecute on the facts. And the jury heard all the facts in this case, and they rendered a verdict accordingly, and we thank them for that. This was not a case against the nursing community. This is about the actions of one individual.
Now, Radonda Vaught is still out on bond, meaning she will be a free woman until May 13th, when she'll have to come back here to the courthouse for a sentencing hearing. She could face multiple years behind bars. Now, meantime, I asked the district attorney's office, are they concerned about the precedent this could set for nurses that make mistakes on the job? They say they are not concerned that this was just about one woman, but a lot of nurses following this case see it much differently. For that part of the story, let's turn to News Channel 5's Kelsey Gibbs, who is live at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Kelsey?
Hey, Chris. Yeah, absolutely. We spoke with some of those nurses after the verdict, and some of them just said they did not want to go on camera. They didn't even want to give us their names out of fear of retaliation from the state, but they were visibly shaken, saying this decision will change the profession of nursing forever.
The vast majority of nurses really feel like, I am Radonda. I could be Radonda. This could happen to me.
It will give us the impression that society doesn't support us, that the judicial system doesn't support us, and this is supposed to be one of the most noble professions and one of the most highly honored professions, and if your society and community doesn't support you, then what's the point in doing it?
It was not the verdict these nurses were hoping for, as they showed up every day to support former nurse Radonda Vaught's trial. When the verdict was read, everyone remained calm, but outside in the hall, some were speechless, and others again did not want to go on camera, but telling us this was not justice. Nurses not just from Middle Tennessee lined the halls and sat in the courtroom to support Vaught. Erica is a nurse who traveled from Las Vegas. She's been following the case from the beginning, and she says she's been at the trial all week.
Ideally, she should be exonerated, and Vanderbilt should be held accountable for their portion of systems failures in this. She's already lost her nursing license. That's plenty.
That same nurse telling us the only positive that comes out of this is that more nurses will be extra vigilant at work, because she says, and quote, they're just downright terrified that something like this could happen to them.
This actually isn't the first time a nurse's medical error resulted in criminal charges. So in 2006, a nurse named Julie Tao, who had worked in her unit for 15 years and had a spotless work record, had worked a double shift on the night of July 3rd. Someone called out sick for the 4th of July. So Julie slept a few hours and then covered her coworker's shift. 2 weeks prior to this, the obstetric unit had added a barcoding system for IV fluids. The technology did not actually work very well with IV bags, so it failed to register the bags at least 30% of the time, and sometimes as much as 70% of the time. So because of this, an RN nurse had dual medication administration process for intravenous antibiotics and epidural medications. So if the barcoding did not work, they manually entered the information and worked around the system. Julie Tao found the barcoding system frustrated and decided that until it was more reliable, she was not going to use it. And other registered nurses were also struggling with this new system. The unit secretary printed a patient identification wristband for Jasmine Grant and placed it in the pocket of Jasmine's medical chart. It was then taken to Jasmine's birthing room. So the policy at this hospital is that wristbands are printed and put on the patient as soon as possible, prior to performing any treatments or providing any medications. And then a nurse must check the wristband to make sure it is the correct patient. It was Julie's responsibility to fasten that wristband to Jasmine Grant's wrist, but the wristband was never placed on her. Okay, so Julie's multitasking right now because she has 2 complicated patients. And she just came off a double shift, slept a few hours, and then is covering her coworker's shift. Okay, so she has Jasmine Grant, and then she has another patient that is full-term, that is getting ready to deliver a full-term deceased baby, which is very emotional. I actually had 2 friends go through it, and it's absolutely devastating. Like 39 weeks. It was awful, awful. And because Julie ran the hospital's bereavement program, she was given this patient also. Jasmine Grant was just a teenager. I think she was like 16 years old. She had very little prenatal care and little preparation for labor. So she was terrified. She was unmarried, and her boyfriend was a gang member who was present at the hospital with some of his buddies as well as family members, which resulted in a very complicated environment filled with a lot of commotion. Julie meets with Jasmine and her family in the birthing room and spends almost an hour explaining the process and answering the questions. Julie's focus was on alleviating Jasmine's anxiety, obviously because she's a child. She's just a baby herself. And she has this baby coming that she's not ready for with a boyfriend that's a gang member. They had a discussion about the possibility of Jasmine receiving an epidural. Her mother insisted that Jasmine wanted epidural only as a last resort. Julie was convinced that Jasmine would do better with and needed an epidural, but one had not yet been ordered. Julie removes the medication and shows it to Jasmine and tells her that the epidural will help to alleviate her anxiety. So the protocol for this hospital is, before you call for an epidural, you get the epidural kit, you have it ready, and you prepare the patient so everything is ready when they get there, when the anesthesiologist gets there. In reality, the protocol was a little more than a checklist. It had not gone through a formal process of approval. Julie asked one of her coworkers to bring a 100 milliliter bag containing antibiotics, identified by a yellow dot, and a 100 milliliter bag into the room, identified by an orange dot, that contained the epidural medicine. Julie picked up the incorrect bag and accidentally hung it into the intravenous line, thinking it was the antibiotic. As a result, Jasmine had a seizure and her heart stopped. The team started CPR and made a quick decision to have an emergency C-section. The baby appeared on time and continues to be okay. The local anesthetic induced cardiac arrest that was not reversible with cardiopulmonary resuscitation alone, and Jasmine did not survive. It's terrible. It's so sad. That poor thing. In March of 2007, Tao pled no contest to the lesser charges. She was sentenced to 2 years probation. State regulators also suspended her license until April. They limited her work hours for 2 years, and they fined her $2,500. Okay, so this case has a lot of mixed reviews, and nurses are even quitting their jobs out of fear of facing the same fate for making a mistake, while others are saying that it was very, very preventable. I want to know your opinions in the comments, and I want to know which side you stand on. Just remember to keep it polite and classy, because that's who we are.
Nurses around the country say they're quitting their jobs because of Radonda Vaught's guilty verdict. A jury found Vaught, a former Vanderbilt nurse, guilty for criminally negligent homicide. It comes after she gave a 74-year-old patient a fatal dose of the wrong medication back in 2017. News 4's Marissa Sulik spoke with nurses across the country today, leaving the profession and what they're doing now. Marissa.
Marius, after that verdict was read, many nurses joined this 8,200-member strong Facebook group called Nurses March for Radonda. Right now, hundreds plan to travel to Nashville for Vaught's sentencing next month and protest. Some feel so strongly about the verdict, they left their job.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Radonda Vaught, guilty of gross neglect.
Ever since Radonda Vaught's guilty verdict rang out, nurses across the country felt the need to flee.
I am quitting travel nursing because of the verdict.
Jennifer Alvera is one of those. She was a travel nurse for 17 years. Now, as you can see in our interview, she's in a moving truck heading to Florida.
I am currently moving. I just finished my last travel assignment in St. Paul, Minnesota.
She says after years of hard work, she can't become criminally liable for something she didn't intend to happen.
But I can make a mistake. I'm human. I don't know that I've ever made an error that has reached a patient. I don't believe that I have, but it could happen tomorrow.
Any of us could make a mistake, but I don't think any of us could have made this mistake.
Scott Shelp has been a registered nurse for 30 years. Instead of leaving, he's going back to school to become a nurse practitioner, a career he values.
I mean, if you can't see the warning on the vial when you inject it, you can't blame the hospital for that.
He believes Vaught should not have gone to criminal court and hopes she serves a light sentence. But he also says nurses need to be held accountable for the standards.
I really would like to see nurses, instead of fear-mongering and scaring each other to death, to take this opportunity to recommit ourselves to the profession.
It could legit happen to anyone. I am Radonda.
It's a profession Alvera has identified with for years, a profession she's leaving behind.
I am Jennifer. I am a nurse. Like, that's how you are. And so to quit nursing is going to be a change to my entire life. So not everybody can do that.
Alvera says she will be one of those nurses here in Nashville for the sentencing next month.
An online petition has more than 170,000 signatures supporting clemency for former nurse Radonda Vaught. But the family of the patient who died says this backlash has re-traumatized them.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Radonda Vaught, guilty of criminally negligent homicide.
The jury found former Vanderbilt nurse Radonda Vaught guilty of 2 charges for an accidental injection death of 75-year-old Charlene Murphy in 2017.
There are going to be mistakes that are made. Some of them, unfortunately, are life-threatening. The answer is not to incarcerate those people.
Dr. Pamela Mehta is one of thousands of medical professionals from across the country that has expressed concern over criminalizing medical mistakes. Hannah McLaughlin is a nurse from Syracuse, New York, who started that online petition.
I think the outcome of this is going to be detrimental to our profession. Absolutely.
But the district attorney's office says this was not a case about a simple mistake. This was about 18 instances of gross neglect.
The district attorney's office supports victims, and the victim in this case was Charlene Murphy.
The reaction to the verdict led to the Murphy family issuing a statement. They feel friends and political candidates have made them into bad guys. They feel humiliated, degraded, and say they may never get over the reaction to this verdict. What is your response to that?
I don't think the nursing community is going after the family itself because they lost, a family member in a very tragic way. It's more of an institutional relationship there.
The Murphy family ends by saying, quote, "Our mother was a caring and loving person. Those using her death for personal gain should be ashamed." Radonda Vaught will be sentenced on May 13th, and nurses I've spoken with from all across the country say they plan to be there.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm a nurse, and you may have seen Radonda Vaught in the news. And I'm here to tell you Radonda was always going to happen. This trial should be just a big old convention of nurses let's talk about the culture that led to this. Because for years, nurses have been given more and more and more to do with less and less and less resources.
Any message to nursing students or people thinking of going into nursing right now in light of this verdict?
I would say that It's a valid concern. Just remember why you entered this profession in the first place, why you decided you wanted to go to school to be a nurse.
My reaction to the Radonda Vaught trial case is anger and frustration, as well as a sense of injustice and lack of accountability on healthcare as a whole.
I would say staffing is probably the biggest thing. You know, we're very overworked, we're very understaffed as a generalization. I don't see that changing, so it creates a lot of fear for me because of the way that Radonda's case has been handled, where things have been very punitive. I personally have made medication errors, and I think that most healthcare professionals have in some capacity. And she reported herself, which is what you're supposed to do in that situation. And we know that her hospital system did not support her, which is really scary for us.
I don't think nurses should be held accountable to a criminal standard where medical professionals are held accountable every day for what we do. And nurses, especially in these critical care units, work very hard. They work under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. Nobody's denying that she made a mistake, but this sets a whole new precedent.
She was doing her job, albeit incompetently, but that's the difference. There's a difference between, incompetent and making a mistake versus a criminal matter. And for it to rise to the level of a criminal matter and for her to face prison time is just beyond me.
It's a nurse's worst nightmare to harm a patient. Just the difference between those two medications and the way that they come in their form should have set off alarm bells. Wait a minute. All of us have made some missteps and decisions that were wrong, but I think just the very nature of the two medications leads me to believe that she really did skip steps that killed a person, that took a person from their family and took a person from their own life.